What is XLOOKUP, how does it work, and why is it useful for consultants? Hi, my name is Jonas Niari. I'm a strategy consultant, and on this channel I want to help you to learn the necessary skills that you need for your first years in consulting to have a successful career, but also to live a balanced life. And today we have an Excel topic. We talk about the XLOOKUP function. The XLOOKUP function is a rather new function. It was published in released in 2020, and it helps you to look up data points from data tables. So in the past, there have been mainly three other functions that you could use for that. It was the VLOOKUP function, the HLOOKUP function, and then the index match combination. But now index match tries to, combine all the functionalities and to replace the other functions. So in the past years, I experimented a little bit with XLOOKUP and tried to find out what the advantages and disadvantages are compared to the other functions and how you could use them. So what I want to do today is to talk a little bit first about advantages and disadvantages of the XLOOKUP function. Then I want to talk about how it really works. We talk a little bit about the syntax and how you use it. And then I will talk about how you can use XLOOKUP to replace VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and index match. With that being said, I would say let's jump into Excel. So as I said, XLOOKUP is a new function that was introduced in 2020. It helps you to look up data from data tables, and typical use cases would be, for example, if you would look up customer data or sales data. So let's assume you have a data table with all of the customers in the rows and then the products in the columns, and then you could say, okay, I want to look up the sales from one customer of one product, and for that you could use the lookup function. Or let's assume you have a data table with the historical financials and all the P&L positions in the rows, and then you could retrieve, let's say, the EBITDA from 2020 through a lookup function. That are typical use cases in consulting. Well, as I said previously, you could use VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and index match for that, but now we have XLOOKUP. And let's talk about a little bit about the advantages that XLOOKUP has compared to the other functions. So first of all, I think you have only one formula for all the lookups, so that of course makes it much simpler. Also, it's faster to write because in my opinion the syntax is much easier, and it's very flexible in use because you only have one function for all the functionalities. The disadvantage, we have to say, is that it's still a bit slower compared to index match. So this is based on the algorithm that is behind this function in Excel. So the method of calculation is less efficient in lookup functions than in index match. So I would recommend, if you have larger data tables or larger models, that you still use index match. But especially if you have smaller models, then you certainly can use XLOOKUP for all the lookup applications. So with that being said, I would say let's jump into the part where we talk about how it actually works. So what I did here was to lay out the syntax. And you see that the XLOOKUP function has basically 6 elements in the syntax, but only the first 3 are important. So you first have the lookup value. There you enter the value that you want to search for. Then the lookup array. This is the array where you search for the value that you have in the lookup value, and then the return array, so the value that is returned by the function. Then you have 3 other elements. It's the if not found. This is pretty useful because it's basically the function of if error. So this means if Excel does not find the value that you search for, or if it throws an error, then you can say here, okay, then return NA, for example, if not available. So this is helpful because then you don't need if error to include. And the other twos, you can quickly forget about them because there's a preset that is totally fine for more than 99% of the cases. So forget about these. Rather focus on these 3. And sometimes if you want to avoid using if error, then you can also use the 4th element in the syntax. But now let's take a look how it actually works. So let's focus on the 3 main elements of the syntax: the lookup value, the lookup array, and the return array. So let's assume we have a data table here with columns and with rows, and then we want to look up values from columns. So let's say we want to look up a value from column 3, and what we want to look up is row 4. So what we say is the lookup value is row 4. Then we say, okay, the lookup array is the first column here, And then the return array is column 3. And what Excel now does is that it looks in the lookup array for the lookup value. So it goes to row 4, and then it returns the corresponding value in the return array. Okay, so it looks here in column 1 for this lookup value and then returns the corresponding value in the return array. And this here is the 38. We have the same syntax if we want to do it vice versa. So if we want to look up values in rows. So let's say we want to look up something in row number 4, and what we want to look up is the value of column 3. So now we have the same principle. The lookup value is here, column 3, the red marked cell. Then Excel searches for this value in the lookup array, and then it gives us the corresponding value in the return array. And again, we have here the 38. And as you see, we have two times the same syntax, although we have 2 different use cases. And that's the strength of the XLOOKUP function. It doesn't matter if we search in rows, it doesn't matter if we search in columns. You can always use XLOOKUP and only have to remember one formula. So with that being said, I would say let's jump into a data set. And I have here the representatives, so sales representatives, and then the sales in units and the sales in total USD. And I want to show you now how you can use XLOOKUP to replace VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and then the index match function. So let's first take a look at the VLOOKUP function, how you can replace the VLOOKUP function. So if you go into the Excel again, then here we have the table. And what we want to do is that we want to look up data points. We want to look up the total sales, so the total USD from Andrews and Howard. So let's first use the VLOOKUP function. This is very basic. Oops, sorry. If you don't know how the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP and index match works, then please leave a comment. I can also do, of course, a video about that. So I will keep it short here. So we look up the value Andrews. We look up for Andrews, then in the here in this data table that are marked red, and then it returns column number 3, and then false for exact match. We copy it down, and as we see, Andrews column 3, it's 438, and the same for Howard, so this works. Now let's do the same for the XLOOKUP with the XLOOKUP function. So we include or we insert XLOOKUP, then again lookup value Andrews. Then the lookup array, as we said, is the column in which we want to search for Andrews. Here we go. And then now the return array is total USD, like that. Looks good, and we see it works. And as you see, I think, personally, the syntax is much easier here compared to the VLOOKUP that we used previously. So let's now take a look at how this would work with HLOOKUP. So if you go to the Excel again, then we do the same with HLOOKUP. Now this time we want to look up a value for Jill, and we want to see units and total USD. Now we use HLOOKUP. This time, units. Then the table array is again this here, so we fix it. And then, Jill is in column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, so it's 5. Then false. And here we go. And it works. It returns the right values. It returns the units and total USD for Jill. Now let's do the same with XLOOKUP. Lookup value, again, pretty similar. Then the lookup array, we go up. This time we have to search in the first row, and the return array is the row where Jill is, and Jill is here, so we fix it, and here we go. And as you see, again, we could use the same formula, the same syntax, the XLOOKUP syntax for replacing VLOOKUP and replacing HLOOKUP. So searching in columns versus searching in rows, it's one function. Well, now maybe you're wondering, okay, sounds good, but I use index match all the time because, I learned from a very early point in my career that I never should use those VLOOKUP functions and HLOOKUP functions. And you're totally right. But nevertheless, you can replace index match as well with the XLOOKUP function, and I will show you in a second how this works. So what I did is basically I created a drop-down menu here so that we can switch between units and total USD, and then we can also select, the sales representatives. Now let's use index match. Index, this is very, very classy how you would use index match. We mark it here. The match, we are looking for Jill in this first row. Oops, this didn't work. Let's do it again. Then exact match, of course. Then match. This time we look for total USD. And we want to look in the first row. Exact match. Yes. No, it didn't work. Sorry, this is a mistake here. You see this happens from time to time because of course we want to mark the entire table. Now it should work, yes. And if we now select units and then the sales representatives, then you see that this works. And this is how you would typically use index match. But now let's use XLOOKUP. And in my opinion, it's a bit easier to use. We start with the same. We use one XLOOKUP function to look up the rows. It's the same, we select the lookup value, and then we select this lookup array. And here comes the trick. Now what you need to do is that you need a second lookup function for the columns. Select the columns as well. And now this is important, that now the return array that you select here is the entire table here. Of course, you need to fix it, close it, and then we got it. And now if we select it, oops, we have the same function. So just to double check, let's use units and Morgan, where is he? And this should be the same number, and this is the same number. And as you see, if you just take a look at the syntax, this is index match as we would use it, and we can do the same by using two XLOOKUP functions. So selecting the lookup value, then selecting the row for the lookup array, and then using a second lookup function for the columns. And this is important, selecting here the entire table at the end, and then you can replace also index match. So in my opinion, index match is still very good, especially if you're used to working with index match, and most people know how to do that, especially people who have a lot of experience. And I use index match very often. So for me, it's still hard, sometimes to work with XLOOKUP if I want to replace index match, because I'm so into index match that it almost became second nature, to work with that. But nevertheless, if you're new in consulting, and if you are, if lookup functions are new to you, then I think it's much easier to work with XLOOKUP, because you're more flexible. You only have one function, and you can use index match, especially if you have larger data tables that you want to work with. So as I said, XLOOKUP is certainly a great function that you should learn about, that you should know how to use, because it makes your life in consulting much, much easier. If you want to learn more about the important Excel functions that you need in consulting, then check out my free consulting masterclass, where you can learn what kind of skills you need to be prepared for your consulting career. And there I also talk about important Excel functions. Also, if you like this video and if you want to see more Excel videos, then please leave a comment. Of course, please subscribe also to the channel and activate the bell, so this helps you that you don't miss any new video here. And with that being said, thank you for watching. Wish you have a very successful day. Talk to you soon. Goodbye, Johannes.